Hello, and welcome to What is Innovation, the podcast that explores the reality of a word that is in danger of losing its meaning altogether. This podcast is produced by Outlast Consulting, LLC, a boutique consultancy that helps companies use innovation principles to solve their toughest business problems. I'm your host, Jared Simmons, and I'm so excited to have Robin Gaster, PhD. Robin Gaster, PhD, is a visiting scholar at George Washington University Institute for Public Policy and the President of Incumetrics, Inc., a data and program evaluation consultancy that serves clients seeking to understand the intersection of technology, innovation, economics, and politics. Clients include think tanks like the National Academies, Brookings, and the Berkeley Roundtable on the International Economy, U.S. government agencies, including Navy, Small Business Association, and NIST, foreign governments such as Sweden and Finland, and big companies like Houghton Mifflin and Deloitte. He graduated from Oxford University with a degree in politics, philosophy, and economics, and has also received an MA in philosophy from the University of Kent and a PhD from UC Berkeley, where he won a national award for his dissertation. He has taught at UC Berkeley, University of Virginia, American University, and George Mason University. Dr. Gaster, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here.
I'm really excited to kind of unpack the insights you've garnered over this amazing career, and I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about your book, Behemoth: Amazon Rising, that came out this month.
Thank you.
So I'm excited to dive in. So we always start. Tell me, what is innovation?
It's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's often a profound misconception. People think that innovation is inventing new things, that new technologies, electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles or new bioagents, that is innovation. And I don't think it is. I think it's invention. No, invention is what you do when you make new things.
Right.
And to me, innovation is what you do when you solve problems in new ways.
Mm.
So if you have a problem and you have to find a new solution to it, you've innovated. And what you can also say, if you use that definition, that the problem tells us a lot about how important the innovation is. If it's a very widespread problem, then your innovation is going to have tremendous scope.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a very deep, important problem, then your innovation is going to have depth. It's going to be important. Even if it isn't very wide, it can still be a tremendously important innovation. You can solve things, important things for a few people.
Right.
And this notion of solutions implies really strongly that you have to implement the thing.
Mm.
In the tech space, that usually means coming to market in some way, selling your solution to somebody, but it doesn't have to. It could be that you found a sponsor, a nonprofit, for example, that wants to have your vaccine distributed widely.
Right.
That would be fine too. So, but the key thing is implementation. How do you get the thing out there so it's actually used?
Mm.
So that's the distinction I see, and there's some really interesting problems because the people who invent things tend to not be the people who are really good at implementing things.
Right. That's a very distinct skill set, and some people have them both, I would imagine, but it's not a large group of folks that do.
That's right. When I was working for the National Academies, I interviewed the CEOs of dozens of small companies that got SBIR awards from the government, Small Business Innovation Awards from the government. And these were brilliant people who had wonderful capacities to invent things.
Mm.
And the government funded these inventions, and they got there. But it was apparent that yes, there were sort of technical risks. Was it really going to work? That was often these things didn't work.
Right.
They're supposed to be cutting edge technology, so naturally you have to have some failures. But it was completely apparent that the real problem was the next step,
Mm-hmm.
getting into the market and not just even getting into the market, being successful in the market.
Right.
Out of those companies, there were thousands of these companies that we studied as part of this, small businesses that, that some of which grew into really big businesses like Qualcomm.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But, 3% of the projects accounted for almost all of the success.
Oh,
It's just that there are very few big winners in that world because it's so difficult in the marketplace. So many things. You have to get money, you have to get distribution, you have to hope that somebody bigger than you doesn't just eat your market.
right.
You have to hope that your key technology guy doesn't leave for some better opportunity. I mean, it is a terribly difficult thing. And the people who are great at inventing tend to be pretty linear
Right.
and imaginative, but pretty linear. And they like to proceed from A to B to C, and they test A and B, and okay, B is better. Let's move down that path. That's how they do it.
Right.
And business doesn't work like that.
I know.
There are too many decisions that come at you too fast, and you have to develop some tools and some instincts and some help, usually,
Right.
to get yourself so that you are trained enough to make those decisions. And they're kind of antithetical. They don't work like Jeff Bezos is fond of saying that if you wait for 90% of the information to come in, you're too late.
Right.
So you have to go earlier, and scientists and engineers are very uncomfortable with that.
Right. I think that's a very important insight in terms of you talked about innovation, the distinction between innovation and invention. Also, the role of humility, almost, or openness to influence or see the value in other skill sets. I would imagine that's a core component to.
So
Exactly.
Your method, whatever it is, and it's often quite rigid, has gotten you to the point where you have a product.
Right.
So you have this, successful model behind you, and somehow you have to realize that that successful model is not going to work moving forward. And more to the point, even that it's very possible that you are the problem. Which is a terrible thing. I mean, I really feel for these guys.
Right.
They've climbed the mountain, and then they suddenly realize the Himalayas are in front of them.
That's so true. And it's almost like not necessarily just a new mountain to climb. It's like climbing a mountain and then finding out you have to learn how to fly in space. Great that you got to the top of the mountain, but
right. I think you're exactly right. It's not that you just have to climb the next mountain. No, now you have to become a scuba diver.
Right. Yes. Exactly. And that having the energy and the capacity to be able to take on that new set of skills is not a common thing.
No, it's not. It is really not. And I have tremendous admiration for the people who've managed to do it. And there are, there are plenty of them out there. But it means that a lot of very promising technologies are just stillborn, basically. They can't get traction, they run out of money, and they're done. Sometimes, they get picked up later by other companies, or the people who invented things move on and reapply that knowledge. So It's not all lost, but it's a shame. It goes into those things. And I really feel for the scientist entrepreneur. It's a really difficult thing. And, to give up control of your baby is it's just a terrible thing. It's like giving up for adoption. I mean, it's your baby, your child, and you have to come to the realization that you are not the best parent for that child.
Yeah, right.
Wow. So that's a painful thing to do.
And I wonder with, the sort of rock star status that, these multi-billion-dollar founders have developed and, in our modern culture, Jeff Bezos, Sarah Blakely, and the like, Elon Musk, you can name the CEOs as readily as you can, the companies.
Yeah.
And it really is usually about one name.
I gotta tell you, I just hate that stuff.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
I just hate the great man theory of
Yeah.
that it was this person who did. I mean, yes, of course. And having written a book on Amazon, even though I deeply resent the idea, the reality is that Bezos was and is immensely influential.
Hmm.
You know, Zuckerberg still really runs Facebook in a very hands-on way, and he's managed to do that while growing it just like Bezos has done.
Right.
You know, if you imagine sort of self-belief that comes from getting your technology to the point that it has a market,
Right.
that's already there, and you know your scientist inventor has gotten to the point where they have some validation,
Right.
right? But now you take that and create a $400 billion company out of it. I would imagine that hearing you are wrong happens really rarely.
Right. Right.
I, I just don't think they hear that very much anymore.
Right. And do you think that contributes? I mean, I can't think of a company in the, in the last 50, 60 years that has gotten to a point where Amazon is today that hasn't regressed at some point. Do you think that is an element in the regression
I
of
don't think Amazon is regressing anywhere.
mm,
I think Amazon has built a pretty much unbreakable series of moats around its core business.
mm,
It has all the customers,
right,
it has all the independent sellers, it has the best delivery network in America, far better than anyone else's for its purposes.
sure.
It has the marketplace, and it has Prime.
Mm.
You know, I mean, are you a Prime member?
I am a Prime member. Yeah.
Well, you know, you're not alone because Amazon has 120 million Prime members in the US,
Wow.
and there are 125 million households, right? You just shake your head.
That's
Okay,
amazing. Yeah.
Prime is brilliant. Prime is an
Mm,
incredible innovation. As Bezos said, his is the only company to figure out how to use Golden Globes to sell shoes,
mm,
right?
right.
And there's room for only one. I
Mm,
mean, you're not going to buy another membership that looks like that.
right. Right.
Amazon can satisfy everything you need. Why would you?
Right. Yeah. It that has sort of boggled my mind a bit about Amazon. When I look at it, I grew up in the consumer packaged goods world, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Colas, and some other places.
Uh,
And so when I think about innovation and being consumer centric, it comes from a very product focused point of view.
right.
And when I look at Amazon, it's almost like looking through a foggy window to try to understand exactly sort of what the core thing that has created this loyalty and this sort of ecosystem. To me, it's sort of akin to the influence of iTunes on the Apple ecosystem and that being the backbone for iPod and iPad and all those things.
That's right.
But it's on another level because the tentacles reach into so many different physical products.
Any place that there is delivery involved
Right.
and where you can order it online and where it's more or less a mass product, so it's not bespoke, it's not custom,
Right.
Amazon is going to be right at the front of the queue,
Hmm.
right? And that includes bulldozers.
Right.
You know, is there a limit here? No.
Right.
And then you have AWS, which is internet services. So you have that piece of it.
Can you talk a bit about that? I think that's a piece that a lot of folks don't appreciate in terms of this contribution of AWS.
Yeah. So at the time, when AWS was invented around 2006,
Okay.
it went live in 2006. It went live as a solution to a problem, just like we talked about. It was an innovation. And the problem was that Amazon's website was collapsing under pressure.
Oh,
And it was collapsing under pressure because, like most websites at the time, it had a unitary code base. So if you wanted to change anything, you were changing this one giant lump of code.
I see.
And this was not only difficult, but tremendously risky. You know, we all know about software errors, right?
Yeah.
And so if Amazon was trying to change things quickly and often, it faced the possibility that it would crash its system constantly. So everyone was very cautious, and it was very difficult to do new things. They couldn't serve new markets. They were under more pressure because they had just taken on the job of running the internet store for both Borders and Toys R Us. And one can tell how good a decision that was by those executives, but that's another story.
Yeah.
So now they had 3 separate websites to run, and they had only one set of code. So you can imagine how complex and difficult that was. There were millions and millions of lines of code. So they made the decision to do 2 things: to move to the cloud instead of making it server-based, and to make it modular. So that instead of having a unified code base, you had basically Lego. You had these predefined pieces that you could reconfigure in different ways. So that, for example, now when Amazon wants to add a new category to its retail sector, it goes into a new area of retail, there is no code. They don't need to do any new coding. They just reconfigure the Lego pieces and off you go. So AWS was built primarily for Amazon.
Okay.
But they realized quickly that other companies had the same problem and could use the same solution. And so they opened the door and people flooded in.
Wow.
Because it was much cheaper.
Right.
It was much more agile. And Amazon did smart things to make it really easy for its developer customers. For example, it used to be, if you wanted to be a customer of IBM, you basically had to apply.
Oh.
You would, put in an application to become a vendor or a partner or whatever, and and they would look at it, and they would look at your credit scores, and it would take a few weeks, and you would do it. And Amazon, you just call up with a credit card, one credit card, and you're in, and you can do it now online in the middle of the night with nobody looking at it, right? It's just there. It's just that you're buying a service.
They eliminated the barrier.
Right. So they made it fast, easy, and cheap. And very effective. So at the time, between say 2006, 2016, something like that, Amazon and AWS were deeply interconnected. Amazon needed AWS because there wasn't anyone else. AWS needed Amazon because it was by far its biggest customer. Things have changed. AWS accounts for about 37% of global internet services revenue. So Amazon, for example, is how Netflix runs. It's how many other big companies run, how parts of the government run. So it's this huge underlying infrastructure. It's like they own the road. Right. And it's about 1/3 of the global road network. Wow. So they're huge. So AWS, Amazon is a good customer, but it's not a strategically dominant customer like it used to be. Similarly, for Amazon, AWS is important because it provides services to Amazon, but Amazon could buy those services if it didn't own AWS. This notion that somehow, this is probably not totally relevant here, but this notion that you can kind of solve Amazon by breaking apart AWS and Amazon is rooted in a misunderstanding.
Is that a prevailing sort of theory?
Warren is hot to trot. I mean, think about this. So if they spin off AWS, AWS is probably worth $500 billion. Wow. So if they sold AWS, they would be sitting on a pile of cash that's $500 billion high. One can imagine Amazon could do quite a few things with that. Yes. So I don't see how this is a solution. Giving Amazon more money.
A lot of times I feel like people don't necessarily play things out. So, it's easy to dismiss an argument out of hand, but to say, okay, let's assume this does happen. What are the implications?
I can't see any significant downside with disruption at all.
Because of the value that would be created on their side.
Yeah, and there's nothing to stop them doing everything that they're doing now. They can just buy the services. There's no issue here. What would that do? What would that accomplish? I think there are much more important things to do with Amazon that don't have to do with breaking it up. They have to do with getting in behind the secrecy wall and finding out what Amazon is really doing.
Mm.
That's an entirely different business and more difficult, but much, much more important.
Right, right. Tell me more about that. What are the implications of that?
Look, I'm sure you've thought about digital privacy a little bit. You
Sure.
know, we all worry about our private stuff, but I mean, the reality is that we are walking naked across the digital plane. I mean, we have no defenses. Any company that wants to can administer a colonoscopy at any time. I mean,
Right,
they can look inside.
right.
And efforts to solve this by improving our privacy, our
Mhm.
choice, and they're doomed. I'm sorry. We have this GDPR thing in Europe. So if you
Right.
go to certain websites now, they tell you, we want you, you have to approve our use of cookies, or you have to approve this, you have to approve. Well, do you ever read any of those things?
No.
No, nor do I. No, I'm sorry. I don't have time.
Right,
Life's too short. I'm not going to go
right,
organize my cookies for this one individual site. I mean, forget it. It's
right,
not going to happen.
right,
So
right.
this notion that we are going to be defending our privacy personally and individually, I think is nowhere.
I see.
But the other side of it is we cannot afford to allow the huge digital companies to hide behind what I really consider to be the accident of secrecy.
Mm.
I mean, the secrecy of companies comes originally from the origin of corporations of modern corporations with the East India Company formed in 1600 in London.
Right.
And because it was a private corporation and for other reasons, it was allowed to keep a great deal secret. But if we are going to regulate Amazon, we need to openly understand how Amazon chooses which goods to present to us.
Mhm.
And we need more. We need to understand how it treats its workforce.
Right.
We need to understand why it makes certain decisions.
Right.
And, the same is true of Facebook and Google. Why we need to understand why the Facebook algorithm works the way that it does.
Mhm.
It's fundamentally important. And I think if we're going to control or even influence these companies, we have to demand that they open the kimono in real time.
Mhm.
And that the correct model is not the private corporation, but it's the utility.
Right. Yes.
They
Yes.
want to increase rates. They have to explain exactly why, what the labor rates were, what their input rates were,
Mm.
why this is a good, they have to explain.
Right.
And Amazon in particular, and I think the other companies, can provide this information in real time because they're set up internally to communicate through APIs.
Someone has that information.
Right, the information is there. I mean,
Mm.
if we don't do this, then the notion that antitrust can do this is ridiculous.
Mm.
If we filed an antitrust suit against Amazon today for predatory pricing,
Right.
okay, so we get into court in a couple of years, and then Amazon says, okay, what do you want to know? And we say, well, can we have your pricing documents? And they say, sure, here's your 10 million pricing documents,
Mhm.
right? Or maybe 20 million, some number.
Right.
And we look through them. we have our poor lawyers looking through them.
Right.
And 4 or 5 years later, we get to court and we say, Amazon, you were predatory pricing. And they say, we stopped doing that 4 years ago.
Right.
This last Christmas season, Amazon made 10 billion pricing changes, right? So the notion that you can apply this 19th century model of price analysis
Right.
to this company is just ludicrous. The antitrust folk are fighting on the right side. They just happen to be using a small penknife instead of a howitzer.
Right. Right. And I think the nuances of that distinction, we live in a headline focused kind of world now, and
Yeah.
antitrust is just it's the word,
Right.
that's just the word that is applied to, oh, we see this problem, what we need is antitrust, and I think you're, back to your definition of innovation in terms of seeing a problem, but it not being innovation until it's implemented. There needs to be some innovation in how we think about protecting the consumer
Yeah.
I think we've defined the problem incorrectly.
I think that,
Everyone's talking about breaking them up, keeping them together, regulating them, not regulating them,
right.
all these things. But the fundamental problem is, how do we protect consumers from predatory retailers?
The necessary condition is sunlight.
Hmm.
We need sunlight and transparency on what they're up to.
Right,
Without that, we can do nothing.
right. And because they're faster.
Yes, they're faster. And, we need a digital regulatory agency.
Right,
We need to hire a lot of smart people to manage these enormous companies. Amazon has 10,000 people working on Alexa.
right. Staggering.
Those 200 lawyers over at DOJ are not going to make a dent.
Oh, that is a perfect illustration of the kind of bringing a knife to a gunfight sort of analogy.
Yeah, exactly. So I think sunlight is really the only way forward, and it goes against a lot of our corporate traditions and of our sort of social assumptions.
Right.
We've grown up with the notion that pretty much everything that corporations do should be private.
Right.
I see no reason to believe that.
And I think that is one of those, the dogmatic, sort of things that stifles innovation. And in this conversation about innovation and thinking and looking at Amazon, to me, it highlights the dearth of innovation in the way we think about solutions to the problem that Amazon creates.
Look, I have plenty of criticisms of Amazon in the book, and I also have plenty of places where I recognize what an incredible company they are. There's a whole chapter on Amazon and innovation.
Yeah.
And it starts with a list that's a page long of major innovations that Amazon either invented or pioneered.
Right.
And some of them don't even have to be sort of technical, right? I mean, so for example, the marketplace, which is Amazon's retail platform, is open now to anyone who wants to sell there. Right? So if you are Macy's, you could go onto Amazon's platform and sell there. And you think about what that means. So there've been marketplaces for thousands of years.
Right.
But this is the first time that a major seller has said to its competitors, hey, no problem, come in and sell to our customers on an even basis. You can do that, and we'll take 15% and we're good.
Right.
This is like, Macy's saying to Sears, hey, come on in, why don't you set up shop right in our store and we'll be just great with that.
Right. Right.
It turned out to be a transformative thing. It changed how online commerce worked. It changed what we get access to. That's why you and I, when we go on Amazon, have access to more than 400 million different items.
Wow.
Less than a tenth of those are probably from Amazon.
Right.
The rest are all from these other sellers. So Amazon became the everything store by giving up its ambition to become the everything store.
Wow. Yeah. Right. Right.
So but there's no real technology here. Nothing to do with technology. It's all to do with their decision to apply existing technology in a new way.
Right. And I feel like the effort, it's almost like judo, where you use your opponent's effort against them.
Yeah.
I feel like Amazon approaches competition in sort of the opposite way that most people think about it, because most people think about, I need to build a wall, I need to build a moat, I need to protect myself from my competition. And Amazon said, come on in, set up shop. By the way, we're going to take a percentage. But yeah, you're welcome here. And I think that those types of decisions, I would imagine, and I'm sure you can rattle off decisions like that, but those types of decisions that are counterintuitive and probably make the hairs on the back of the neck stand up for most CEOs seem to be the kinds of things that Amazon leans into.
It does, and it does others. I mean, the decision to go to free 2-day shipping as part of the rollout of Prime, their financial guys were terrified they thought they would drown. And, Bezos, I think, correctly recognized that if it turned bad, they could always back off, but that this was an opportunity to differentiate.
Mhm.
And they've consistently differentiated on behalf of the customer.
Right.
I think that's an important thing too. And other companies always say they're for the customer, and until you try and contact them and you get lost in those endless voicemail trees, and then you
Yeah,
realize just how much they care about the customer.
exactly.
But it's part of the good and the bad side of Amazon. Amazon is indeed the world's most customer-centric large company. That's what their mission is, and that's what they are.
Right.
But what it has led to is an obsession with the customer, completely admitted there.
Right.
And that leads to a lot of things that are not so good, because it means this is not a balanced company. This is a company that is driving obsessively in one direction. And it really doesn't much care about, in fact, it doesn't care at all about collateral damage to anybody who gets in its way or anybody it touches. That was sort of okay when it was a small bookstore.
Right.
But now it's got 1.2 million employees.
And that's just employees. That's not even the
Right, there's all the contractors as well.
right. Right.
And then, and it will be bigger than Walmart pretty soon.
Exactly.
Walmart is in defensive mode and it's trying to hold on to its customers. So the notion that Amazon can just continue to not care about consequences is, I think, dangerous. Amazon is famous for its sort of flywheel approach, that all the pieces connect to each other. So if you have low prices, you get more customers bring in more sellers bring in more product, and then you can afford a better logistics network using lower prices and hence more customers. So you have this accelerating flywheel where all pieces of the flywheel are giving it a push. But the thing, as an engineer, probably you'll recognize this analogy, that all flywheels have a regulator. Why? Because otherwise they disintegrate.
Burn themselves out. Yeah.
Amazon doesn't have any internal regulator.
Mm.
It just has the drive to get bigger and bigger. And, it's trying to grow at 25% a year. That's more or less what it's been growing at for the last year was more because of COVID, but that's what it's been growing at recently. So you think about that. And when you're a $50 billion company, that means you got to find a $10 to $12 billion business. All right. And they've done that. They did that. So in 2017, they decided to do advertising. Advertising is now a $17 billion a year business, and it has 80% margin. Okay, well, that's fine. 50 billion is doable. But Amazon is now almost 400 billion. So now next year, it has to keep this up. It has to somehow find 100 billion in new revenue.
Oh my goodness.
Right? So, and the year after, it'll be 125 billion.
Right.
There's a reason really large companies don't grow at 25% each year.
Right. Exactly.
So you can see the impact in Amazon's sudden push into groceries. Groceries is a bad business for Amazon. I'm going to be blunt here. It's a stupid business for Amazon. It's high cost. That is, it costs a lot of capital to get into it.
Right.
Really low margin.
Right.
It has deep supply chains that are difficult to organize, especially for fresh produce.
And perishable. Yeah.
And it has deeply entrenched, deep pocket competitors. And you need scale to really compete. You got to get over 1,000 stores before you're
physical scale.
Yeah, physical scale. You're in the big leagues.
Yeah. Right.
So in 2006, Jeff Bezos explained in his shareholder letter why Amazon wasn't getting into physical stores. Nothing has changed.
There's nothing about that rationale that would be not true today.
Right, except that they're getting into physical stores.
Right.
And the only reason that I can see is that this is a significant revenue opportunity, and they need to grow their top line.
Top line, yeah, that's what it looks like to me. That's the only thing I could come up with prices if you're just in service of the top line and you've got the cachet and the
Right.
scale to make the sort of investment.
You know, it's been said that they are investing not in the grocery store today, but the grocery store of 10 years from now. Well, maybe true, but I don't think their competitors are going to sit still.
Mhm.
Anything that Amazon does that works will be implemented by Target and Walmart and Kroger's.
Right.
I don't think they'll have a sustainable competitive advantage. I can't see it. I mean, and if they are successful, well, you know, what kind of margins would they get? Probably the same as the rest of the
Right.
1 to 2%.
Right.
On the other hand, they're probably going to get into healthcare, and that's a different business and one where there's a lot of opportunity.
Yes.
So I can see that, and I think we're going to see Alexa become a really important gateway for them. That's another paradigm change that they're driving,
Right.
where there's a sort of unified quasi-intelligent hub for the household
Mhm.
that deals with your security and deals with your welfare and your information and some entertainment.
Right. That's a great kind of view into the potential future and where, you know, that and sort of underscores how Amazon got to where it is. Some good bets like Alexa and pharmaceuticals on the horizon.
Yeah.
Probably some bad bets, you know, like grocery, but or Amazon of the phone or restaurant.
Take Ring, for example. So Ring is their video doorbell
Right.
and their security system. So they have all this video running into the cloud, and they're now partnering with more than 1,000 police departments to provide access to this video. Should homeowners allow that?
Right.
Police departments are incentivized to encourage homeowners to do that.
Of course. Yeah.
Install Ring. And Amazon is doing this in such a classic Amazon way. It's just a way to drive Amazon's presence forward, both at home and in the police departments.
Right.
Right. So it gets a twofer for it, if you like.
Yeah. Clever.
There's no real thought there about possible collateral damage. What happens when people start calling in suspicious activities because they happen to catch it on some guy walking past on the video?
Right.
Or, you know, I have seen at least one police department has abandoned their partnership because they're getting too many false positives.
That makes sense.
But in a deeper sense, what does this do? It trains us to see the world outside as suspicious, right?
Right.
Amazon, for its own purposes, is training us to be paranoid.
Right. Because there's a market in it.
You know, they would say that's not our problem. It's nothing to do with us. We're just providing this service.
Right.
And how people use it is really up to them. And, you know, we don't give up information unless there's permission.
Right.
You see that they're giving this service, but they are transforming us.
I see. Yes. No, and it's very subtle, but it's pervasive. And as it moves into additional aspects of our lives and how we view the world, it can take on a different and more impactful sort of
The point is not even that it's sort of evil. It's just that it's kind of amoral.
Right.
It's not deliberately evil. I don't think they're trying to be evil. I just think that their interest is elsewhere and they don't really care about the collateral damage.
Right. And that brings me to kind of a question around your view of innovation. And you have a background in philosophy.
Yeah.
And when I look at Amazon, I think about the good that it creates for the consumer.
Right.
And nobody has created more value for a consumer than Amazon, I think, in the history of the modern world.
I think that's true.
And then the flip side of that coin is at what cost?
Right.
And then how do you weigh the life, improvement that Amazon has provided against some of the other things that we see in the news from time to time, and some of the other things that are inherent to their approach?
You said something really important there. You said is inherent. And I would say that Amazon has been permitted to do this.
I see.
I don't think that the way Amazon acts is necessary to the success of Amazon.
Ah, right. Okay.
I'm fond of saying that I want the Amazon I want, not the one I got. Right? I want Amazon. I use Amazon. I find them remarkable, and I'm delighted with the services. I visited their warehouses. I don't really want that. I mean, they don't have to be so obsessive.
Right.
That's just the reality, that they could take their foot off the gas in certain ways and become a more humane and balanced company, and it would cost them a couple of percentage points of their growth.
Right.
It's not like it would destroy their world. It's just that they are focused only on one thing, and to do that, they squeeze everything else until the pips squeak. They will take every last drop of sweat and blood out of everybody they touch.
I see.
Because they believe that serves the customer best. Look, 150 years ago, we had the Industrial Revolution start in England, and we had child labor, and we had, no overtime limits. We had no safety in the workplace. We had nothing. We had no organizing. We had terrible employers, and we had a race to the bottom.
Right.
And, Engels wrote about how even the most enlightened mill owner had to apply all these terrible labor practices, or they'd be out of business.
Right.
It was a race to the bottom. So over the next 100 years, we put in a floor, and we said, we're going to have a minimum wage. You can only work this many hours. You have to have health and safety at work. You have to pay overtime. There were these boundaries that we set.
Right.
And I think that we need to reset them, because Amazon is pressing up against the edge of the boundaries everywhere. And the other big companies are either want to or are forced to do the same.
Right. Right.
Amazon is big enough to set an example. I just think we need that new paradigm, a new contract with our corporations, our corporate overlords.
Right.
That's where they will be if we don't do this. And at the core of it is information. We need access to information about those companies so that we can judge whether they are behaving appropriately. We need a new set of standards, and we need access to the data.
Well said. Dr. Gaster, it's been great. I want to wrap up with one final question here. Any advice based on everything you've seen with Amazon, everything you've seen with your clients in the space of innovation across industries? What advice would you have for innovators?
Well, aside from reading my book, that's the most important advice, of course. I think Amazon tells us one thing, that you do have to start with the customer. You do have to start with the problem you're solving. And you have to sort of figure out early on how you will get that solution to that customer.
Right.
There is no truth to the theory that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. This is not true.
Right.
Your better mousetrap will sit in the back of the closet along with all the other better mousetraps.
Gathering dust.
You have to think, how am I going to get it? What is my path into the world? Doesn't have to be a market, but into the world, and start with that and work backwards, as Amazon does so effectively.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great learning about you and your book, Behemoth, Amazon Rising. I am excited to pick up a copy. I ordered a copy from the Behemoth Amazon. So looking forward to receiving that.
Well, wonderful.
Thank you for your time and your willingness to join us today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this week's show. You can drop us a line on Twitter at Outlast LLC. OUTLAST LLC, or follow us on LinkedIn where we're Outlast Consulting. Until next time, keep innovating, whatever that means.